All right, we are back for another week of GPS Live. We're mixing it up a little bit this week. Tristan is out, but we got Charlton in. To introduce things, hello, I am Jonathan Singer.
And hey, everybody, my name is Charlton Tresavan. Pleased to
Yeah,
be here.
awesome. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. And what's funny is we were chatting a little bit before the show, and I think we're going to have a really good one. You have some interesting experiences with our stories that we're going to cover this
Yeah,
week.
yeah.
How was your week? Yeah, I heard you had a great public speaking thing here in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, totally. So I work on the AppSec team here on the IA region. And so one of the things that I like to do is outreach to local groups of developers. So if anyone here is listening from the Tampa Bay area, there's a great group called Tampa Devs. Tons of local developers from all kinds of different companies. And I went out there to talk about AppSec, and they loved it. So
Yo,
definitely great opportunity to spread the good word of AppSec where it
good. I'm
matters.
really glad to hear. As you know, I'm also a big fan of public speaking and supporting the communities, right? And so that's
Absolutely.
fantastic. Glad to hear you had a great week. It's been a little hectic over here.
Mhm.
As we'll see, we'll get into some of these stories, and also planning for a big week next week. It's Black Hat. It's B-Sides Las Vegas.
Oh
It's
yeah.
on. I'll see you out there, right? And any of our guests
Oh, and
tuning in
I'll be seeing
online,
you. Oh yeah.
please feel free to reach out to us on social media. GuidePoint Security is hosting a happy hour at Black Hat. You can find more information on our LinkedIn page. So let's just kick this off. We're going to introduce the week of August 5th, 2022. And for those watching this as a replay in the future, you thanks for catching up with us. So let's do this. We do have a bit of important information as always, right? We have to remind everybody that the views and the opinions expressed by the hosts of this live stream are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official opinions of GuidePoint Security. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, right? We can get a little crazy.
You need to get the marketing folks to give you like the dude saying that at like 2x speed, you know?
Oh, like when they do it at like the end of the
Yeah, like
commercials.
in a drugs commercials. Yeah.
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 Like may cause all kinds of side effects. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't know. I feel like it has to be somewhat audible and legible at some point.
Exactly.
I don't want to get too much trouble here. But all right. So I'm just gonna I'll just roll us into this first story here. It's interesting because it's very future looking, and so we're talking about post quantum encryption candidates are already cracked by legacy consumer grade equipment. So we're reading this over. What were some of the interesting highlights you found in the article?
Yeah, sure. So this was just for one particular post-quantum encryption algorithm called SIKE, which is short for super singular isogeny key encapsulation.
That's a
Uh,
lot.
yeah, that is a mouthful. But basically, there were some like fundamental mathematical flaws in it that enabled like a particular type of attack against this class of encryption algorithm called glue and split, which was developed by a mathematician named Ernest Canny in 1997 to basically break this thing with some additional tools on top using a
Okay.
single core PC in about an hour.
Yeah. So, by no means, right, am I any kind of like quantum computing, let alone encryption mathematical expert. But what was highlighted here, right, is, what was interesting. There are four, right? There were four counted that NIST is actually looking at in its latest approach to dealing with post quantum computing algorithms and considerations for encryption. um, you know Ideally they want to replace stuff like things that we're familiar with, RSA, and the good old Diffie-Hellman from computer science class, and even some of the elliptical curve things are essentially on their way up because quantum computing can really destroy those. So NIST is looking at four. This is one of the promising four, right? And
Yeah, and to be clear, this is part of a competition, right?
oh,
To
nice.
find
Yeah, yeah.
like the next set of strong post quantum cryptography algorithms.
Okay. It sounds like we've already, found one of the four potential ones that may be in last place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, better early than never, right?
Yeah, no, I'd definitely rather this stuff kind of come to light before it becomes standardized in some suggested sense. And so the article that we're kind of covering here comes from Tom's Hardware, and it just goes to show that realistically, at the end of the day, right, these algorithms that we're using for some of these encryption standards are simply just math, right? And they're often developed around function. In fact, the developer themselves said that we try to do this to make sure that it works as expected, but and the math is for the most part good, but they're purely mathematical standpoint, not a potential code vulnerability standpoint, and I think that's a bit of where that disconnect kind of comes from, right? So very interesting. There are the other three competitors still out there, and I'm definitely want to see what has happened. Now, we mentioned Psych actually a couple weeks back on another segment regarding how the key was actually extracted via side channel attacks. There was some really cool researchers that do all kinds of attacks on the hardware. Like they look at the electrical signals and the RF signals. We did a story on a SATA cable accidentally being used as an antenna. It just happens that the frequency that it broadcasts a very minuscule signal can be used as kind of like an extraction point of air-gapped systems. So not the first time we're running this down, but yeah, now that we're really getting to the point where quantum computing is going to be available to the masses, we need to solve basic encryption needs before the private key gets found. So I think it's gonna be interesting, right?
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, this one, I'm really excited to talk about this story, right? We're going to go from...
Speaking of critical flaws.
Yeah, speaking of critical flaws, segue time. Charlton, you want to kick off this next story for us?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So this is coming to us from Bleeping Computer, and this is a report on a Department of Homeland Security kind of alert or a warning that they put out with regards to a specific appliance that's used for emergency alert systems for like radio stations and broadcast applications. So this is a flaw in, it was the Monroe Electronics R189 OneNet DASDEC EAS device.
That's a mouthful.
Which
you were explaining to me, what is this thing?
Sure. So this is basically like a rack mountable appliance that, if you have a radio station, you've got sort of a back room that's got all kinds of like audio processing equipment, amplifiers. You've got things in there for like encoding streams digitally or doing, all kinds of filtering and stuff. And another thing that you're legally required to have is basically one of these types of devices. And these, you put them sort of in line with your broadcast, and they have a connection to, the government, where if there's some sort of emergency that's occurring, the government can basically send a message to it, and it'll interrupt the broadcast from your station to deliver that alert. So it's
like one of those things where I'm jamming in my music, then all of a sudden,
boom,
cut.
Yeah, and you hear that horrible.
Oh, okay. And so this is related to that, the noise. Okay, cool, got it. Nice. And so it appears that this rack mount appliance you're talking about is literally just a computer with audio in and audio out. But this computer accepts requests from some kind of government authority, right?
It's hooked to the network, and it's got some sort of connection back to the mothership, wherever that's controlled by whatever government office.
So it's like another IoT device we have to worry about. This time part of a broadcast system rather than just like my thermostat.
Exactly. And so this is obviously a much much more strictly regulated kind of thing. You know, like,
Mhm.
they don't play around in broadcasts with like emergency alert systems. Like even if you play the emergency alert system tone on a broadcast and there's not actually like an emergency alert going out, you will get fined. You know, like they very strictly regulate this. So they're critical infrastructure for getting the word out about like all kinds of different disasters and stuff.
Okay. Interesting. So
Mhm.
I didn't know that. Like, you were sharing a little bit with me some of your experience in the radio field, and so I
Yeah.
learned a ton just hearing about this from you. One of the things that I find super cool, and this relates to like something I love, which is the author who originally found this issue with the device, this emergency device, will be sharing their findings at DEF CON next week. And so I know you and I were just chatting about maybe we can go like watch it because they're going to demonstrate it live. Kind
Yeah,
of crazy.
absolutely. So
Uh,
this will be at the IoT Village, I believe.
yep.
The author of the talk, his name is Ken Pyle. It'll
Mhm.
be at 10 a.m. on August 13th.
Nice.
Burp Suite Forensics Tools and Zero-Day Exploit Development. If you want to catch that, we will probably be there because this is a pretty cool write-up.
Cool. No, I definitely like it. And so the author of the exploit themselves, they do call out in the article that you can easily obtain access to the credentials, right? The certs, the
Hmm.
devices. You can exploit the web server. You can send fake alerts via crafted messages, have them preempt signals at will, right? That you were talking about.
Hmm.
You can lock out the actual users, right? So whoever the government authorities that were triggering the alerts, you can just
Hmm.
be like, nope, not today, um, or
And
simply just
mind you, this
entirely.
is not like a systemic thing across the entirety of like the EAS infrastructure.
Okay,
This is in this
good.
particular vendor's product, which
Okay,
that's at least a good bit of news.
all right, yeah. So okay, so I imagine there's going to be a lot out there. This particular one,
Mhm.
but it probably is still used by a lot of different broadcasters because, and you know what they also mentioned, right? It's not just radio. This is the same kind of system for the TV, right?
Mhm.
When that
Yeah.
happens. Um, so yeah, it just seems like if there's a computer in it, it's probably running some kind of embedded operating system, um, and somebody's going to find like an outdated application. I know SSH was called out specifically,
Yeah, so
in this
apparently
article.
there was like some sort of like certificate, like there was a private SSH certificate that was like resident in the firmware image that could then be used to actually authenticate to the device. So like it had its own private SSH key in the firmware for some reason. And
Okay,
that like he was able to yank that out of the image and use it to connect. Yeah.
makes sense. Okay, well, yeah, telling you, this field, and that's actually kind of like a similar thing. We've heard a lot about devices, IoT devices, or even just like systems that are put together for specific industry purposes. Hard coded passwords, right?
Hmm.
Certificates stored on system, default credentials that are maybe like undocumented, but somebody digs them up by looking at the firmware, looking at the data on the device and what's stored in it. And so it definitely puts consideration into what are the devices that you, in this case, are required to be bringing into your network, right?
Yeah.
And into your environment and your systems.
Hmm. Wasn't there a jurisdiction that actually outlawed default credentials on devices? I can't remember if that was like stateside or if that was in Europe, but I thought I remember hearing something about that some time
Uh,
ago.
I definitely know, most compliances are going to call
Hmm.
out that default credentials need to be changed or removed, right? We're seeing a lot more
Hmm.
adoption of approaches around that. So DEF CON and Black Hat always tend to bring out some very interesting, unique research. And so this is definitely one of those ones that I look forward to learning more about and seeing. I know they've approached everything in around concerns of trains, planes, and automobiles, right? And so now we're looking at emergency broadcast systems. It reminds me, do you recall there was some stories a bit ago about like the hurricane or not, the tornado sirens, and those systems being connected online and potentially vulnerable. I mean, I guess it just leaves the point if it's online.
Well, in those cases, and I know you're an SDR guy as well,
I do
but
love my frequencies.
I don't know if the entry point on those was necessarily like accessing some sort of internet connected controller, though I'm sure that that would also be a perfectly valid and vulnerable kind of entry point. I think in a lot of cases with those, the activation signal that was sent out to the sirens was vulnerable to like replay attacks. So if you just recorded the activation signal and rebroadcast it, you could then activate the sirens at will.
So you could use something like a flipper to
Yes,
rebroadcast that
potentially.
signal. Ah, nice. Well, definitely really cool. And just like the thermostat that hacked a casino for the fish tank, and just like any of the other things out there, all these systems, right, need to be approached. And if you, the listeners online live, want to interact with the comment system, we've already got some people shouting out saying, hey, if you have questions, comments, or additional things to add context to what we're chatting about, we'd love to hear from you. Even in the future, we will see your comments. And so please consider utilizing some of the platforms and the tools for that. All right, we are going to roll from sounding the alarm in real life to sounding the alarm in our mobile devices and a lot of these tactical deception techniques that we're seeing. So this next story happens to actually come from VirusTotal themselves in their blog, and they published an interesting article on deception at scale. They have a larger report here, but the premise of what they're going after is using brands that we're all familiar with, right, and masking malware with those logos and those brand names. What kind of interesting stuff did you happen to catch in this?
Yeah, absolutely. So VirusTotal, they published this excellent report. They call it Deception at Scale, How Malware Abuses Trust. And they basically found that around 10% of the top 1,000 Alexa domains, and that just means like the top 1,000 most popular websites, have distributed suspicious samples. So like programs that may include malware to some degree. That 87% of the more than 1 million signed samples of malware have some kind of valid cryptographic signature on them, from some vendor that like supposedly like signs and vets the programs that they distribute. About 4,000 of the samples that they analyzed were like packed with legitimate app installers. So maybe download something that looks like it's going to give you Google Chrome, and it does in fact install Google Chrome, but it also puts in some malware while it's running as well. And that there's been a pretty sharp increase in the amount of malware installers that are mimicking legitimate installers for popular software. So those are some of the key takeaways.
Nice. Okay. So to kind of like hit on that, right? You mentioned samples that were packed with legitimate apps. So like, I go online and I look up like download Adobe Acrobat Reader, and it's possible, right, that maybe like ads are stuffed on top of our search engines to send you to like not the official Adobe website, and to give you an executable to download that from your user experience, right, will give you the application you asked for, but it's actually wrapped in an outer shell of malware that also installs something else supplemental to your system, right? And they're going to steal what? They're going to steal the icon, right? The favicon. They're going to steal, the naming convention. They might even have deceptive URLs. We saw that either supply chain is getting abused and hosted on legitimate places, or they're simply just malicious websites or compromised websites that these files are just uploaded and hosted on while the getting's good, it seems. That's tough, right? Like imagine going on online and you simply just want to download something and everything about it looks legit. The file looks legit. It's signed, right? And so you're not getting these operating system concerns, but still it is malware. And I think it's tough to ensure that you're always getting it directly from the manufacturer, from the vendor, right?
Yeah. Well, and there's a couple different kind of styles here. And to be absolutely clear, where it's just like you're repacking existing software with malware and like ripping branding off, that is not sophisticated from an attacker standpoint, because like the software has already been written for you. The brand and like all the images and stuff for that have already been made. You're just like, copying and pasting basically. But some of the, on the other side of it, where there's actual malware being distributed by vendors, like from their official repositories of like drivers and things, that was something that was very interesting to both you and I think,
Oh
John,
yeah.
and that kind of calls into question a lot of the supply chain security aspects as well. Because we're talking about, like, we saw Dell on this list, we saw Asus on this list, where you could go to their site and it's like a particular driver update installer for a printer or your BIOS firmware or like a monitor,
And it just so happens to be bundled.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can imagine, right? Sometimes a lot of these manufacturers, are still relying on third parties to source the drivers, right? They're not going to make the graphics card driver for the hardware that they purchase and put in their system as an OEMer. They're going to rely on the source to provide drivers. And maybe if you're like in a scramble and you're just like, we have to make sure all of the parts are supported on our support website and in our driver section, let me just go out and download it and put it in here. And maybe they're getting it from the same malicious place that a lot of these other victims are getting it from, and they're not necessarily getting it directly from the source because of all these deceptive techniques, right? That are hiding these opportunities. This definitely sounds like a challenge in itself because of a lot of the security factors that are already at play. It looks good, it feels good, it's signed, and the fact that reputable domains, right, 10% of the top 1,000, 100 domains that we know and trust are still dishing up malware in some sensitive form.
And not only that, but actually getting signed, with like real, like I think you said there were some on there that were signed by like Microsoft as valid installers for
It's they don't get into full detail on like how are they achieving some of this. It's more of just the the understanding that these are like threats that we are dealing with, and that it's going to apply to our listeners online and those in our communities and our friends and family. And so to kind of be extra careful. I feel like I've seen like this kind of stuff too, on app stores, right? Like clone apps or like apps that give themselves a name, like a popular app, and you end up installing that one on accident. They even put like screenshots and images and logos that look so similar and so convincing to try to get you to click on it, right, and to install those things on your devices. And so it's definitely coming from a little bit everywhere. Let's bounce this one. And you want to kick off our last story of the day and how we're going to go from malware repurposed to malware as a service.
Absolutely. So what if you're an aspiring, botnet builder, malware developer, and
I would hope you're not.
Yeah, exactly. But you need some kind of like out of the box service to support, the entire back end of this, evil botnet that you're creating. Well, there's a new thing called dark utilities that is serving this exact market. And they basically have this platform that allows you to hook into their C2 infrastructure and use it to coordinate and manage all of your breached machines, which is, obviously it's not good, but at the same time, it is technically very interesting.
Yeah. So the article that we're covering here from the Hacker News talks about this online service for sale for a mere €10. You too can get an infrastructure to put together C2 as a service platform or offering, right? Yeah, it offers all kinds of tools to do like remote access, command execution, distributed denial of service, and even crypto mining on infected systems. Now, it's still up to this user to infect the system, right? But it will help you put together, that payload to drop. And now suddenly you have your own botnet. There were some interesting takeaways from the article here. One, for instance, I'm very curious about is the fact that they're using new ways of delivering data. For instance, there was an era where everything was over Tor, but Tor's not anonymous anymore. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Now they're looking at stuff like the IPFS, or the Interplanetary File System, which is essentially a blockchain based file system that, like Tor, you can tunnel to using a gateway. And sadly, it's resilient, air quotes, to content moderation, law enforcement intervention, and is similar to the legacy term of bulletproof hosting. So,
yeah. So this service, by the way, already has about 3,000 customers, which is, that's an appreciable scale for such a niche market, wouldn't you say?
It is, and it's very concerning because the old way, right? Either you were a nation state and you're developing your own C2, you're some kind of author and you're developing your own C2, and now it feels like it's turnkey. Right? Anybody can jump in the game. We saw this in the ransomware world. We were talking about ransomware as a service, where all you have to do is just get the victim to click. The infrastructure, the payments, the support model is all in play. You just handle distribution. And this sounds like it's kind of like a similar business model. I hope I don't see this lasting for very long, but at the same time,
I don't see how it could last, because it's like you basically have these vendors, like this giant C2 vendor with a big target on its back. And if you get them, then you get all these ancillary botnets that are hooked up to it, right?
Yeah.
Like that makes it easier for law enforcement to sweep up, I would imagine.
You do have a point there, right? Yeah, and now that it has so much awareness and highlight, it's a public website. You can actually go to the domain. You don't have to do anything secret to get into this and to subscribe. But yeah, maybe even the fact that the platform is starting to get fingerprinted signatures, identification of heuristics, to the point that it may either need constant revisions to bypass security, or it will essentially just kind of phase itself out because it's so well known now. So,
and it could. So, did you see the news like a week or two ago where it was like the FBI had that whole like secret encrypted phone thing that turned out to be a sting operation?
What was it, like black phone, dark phone? Something
yeah,
like that?
It was something like that, like spy phone, black, dark phone, whatever, But like this would be a great opportunity to do a similar thing, because apparently 3,000 people are willing to just go offload all their botnet stuff to some third party that may or may not be law enforcement. Well, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Right, setting up a hacker or hitman's toolbox, but whoever the author is, right? They're probably just sitting in the background spying, collecting everything, and just getting ready to bust everybody. So no, that's actually a really good spin on it, and I like that. And with that thought, go catch the bad guys. Whoever's out there listening. So thank you. Seriously, thank you so much, Charlton, for joining this week. We hope all of our online listeners enjoyed. We saw some comments coming in, so keep them up. We love hearing from you. Again, this has been the week of August 5th for GPS Live. And kind of our little sign off here is Tristan always does a thing like, and I will always be. So I will always be Jonathan Singer.
I will always be Charlton.
Cool.
So pleasure to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we hope to have you back again soon in the future. This was a wonderful segment. And to everybody online, enjoy, have a great weekend. And again, if you're going to be out at Black Hat and DEF CON, please feel free to reach out and look out for our event at Black Hat on Tuesday evening. All right, let's kick it out.